Um, Great. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Amy Dessenberg-Wines, and I help support the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. And I am delighted to have Kelsey and Shannon today to talk to us about secondary transition and the new access to the parent portal, which is incredible. And I think hot off the presses. So it'll be really nice to learn about that. And one of the things that I'm hoping, and I know that Kelsey and Shannon are really interested in this as well, which is we really want to get input from those of you who are able to join us around what do you, what would be most helpful in what you want to see happen for future sessions, future topics. We've been trying to do a little bit more in depth in the monthly community of practice. And so if there are topics that would really be meaningful to you or that you would like to have, we're going to try to engage in some discussion a bit around that as we have time. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Kels, and then you can let folks know how you want them to ask questions and kind of what you'd like for today's session. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Amy. And to be completely honest, I would like to keep this as casual and informal as possible. I just want it to be comfortable. We have a bunch of slides prepared so that there's plenty of things to talk about. I'm sure we won't have enough time. And that's okay. I think my intention is really just to kind of share the big buckets of updates, the things that are going on in the department now. And I want you to feel free to raise your hand, drop a note in the chat, just say, unmute and say, hey, Kelsey, I need to interrupt you real quick. I'm totally fine with whatever you feel the most comfortable doing. I really just want to have a conversation and, share the exciting things that are happening in our state right now. I know there's been a lot of changes, and so that's a piece of it, but I think there's also a lot of opportunity that comes with those changes. And so that's what I'm hoping to focus on here with everyone today. So as we get started, I really just want to take a quick minute. I'm not going to have everyone, go around and unmute and say their name and where they're from. But I would really like it if you could drop that in the chat for me. Mostly because this will just help me get an idea of who you are, who you represent, who my audience is today, right? But B, I'm also curious if you could tell me about an impactful high school experience, something that really helped, that you feel like helped shape or inform where you're at with your career today or your personal life, just something that happened in high school or experience, a class, something like that really helps shape your future. So I know we've got Ask Resource Center here. Hi, Mari. It's good to see you. And Iowa Total Care. Oh, Shannon, you were a Voc Rehab client. Me too. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Volunteering in the Special Olympics, Lori said. Okay, I can't keep up with all the comments, so I hope you guys are seeing this, but it looks like we have a really good, diverse collection of partners here today. Everything from AEAs to Voc Rehab, providers, MCOs, families, MHDS, I might have said that. You said, hey, Kelly, hey, Ben. It's good to see you guys here. Hi, Pam. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to call you out and introduce you in a few slides here, because I'm really excited to have you on board. Leslie, welcome from Ottumwa. Oh, hey, Nancy. Good to see you. Okay. Thank you for taking a minute to drop your information in there for me. As in terms of our plan for today, really, like I said, a few updates, really focusing on Achieve, our new differentiated accountability process, and our SDI framework, and some of that fun alignment stuff that we've heard so much about in the news as well. To be honest, I really, coming into today, have no idea how familiar you all are with this work, with these projects that I'm referencing. So, we can be flexible and spend as much or as little time as you all need on each topic, right? So with that being said, we'll just go ahead and dive right in. And I'm excited to introduce my colleague, Shannon Grunmeyer, who is our Chief Project Manager. And she is going to share some updates and some really exciting, important work that's happening in the Achieve Family Portal and Achieve in general, to support our families and learners with the IEP process. So Shannon, do you want to jump in and take it from here? Thank you so much for
coming. Sure can. Yes, absolutely. So glad to be here. So I did include information both about our Achieve system as well as our Achieve Family Portal, knowing that we have a broad audience today. So I'll have you skip ahead to the next slide here. So what is Achieve? So Achieve is our early access and special education records gatekeeper, if you will. So everything that we know about our IFSPs and our IEPs live in this system in Achieve now with the state. It provides our special educators and administrators and AEA team members with access to their learner information in real time. So that helps us, lead to the development of customized outcomes and strategies so that each learner can succeed in the best ways possible. So what other things that we should know about are that having access to this Achieve system, again, allows our special education teams to work collaboratively together. And most excitingly, soon we will be able to connect the information that currently lives in Achieve into our new Achieve Family Portal so that that information is also available for family members and caregivers who have the appropriate rights to have that information. So I'll have you skip ahead. So the Achieve Family Portal will be an optional online account that parents and guardians and eligible learners will be able to create an account in. It's certainly not going to be required, but sort of like a health portal will be another way that these users can get access to information that they haven't necessarily had electronically available to them before. So it'll be a great way to, again, get in and have access to view, print, save, download those files. Family Portal users will have the ability to view and potentially electronically sign consent forms if they choose to have that option. Again, accessing their records in real time and having that progress monitoring data available in real time as well, which will be a huge improvement over our current system that, you may only get a progress report every quarter, for example. Really, the goal of this system is to help improve communication between IEP teams and those families and learners who are impacted. Bridging that gap, sharing knowledge, making things a little bit more accessible across the way. And really, hopefully, for this group in particular, engaging our learners more in the process. So one of the exciting pieces for our older students will be that family members can invite them to create an account in the Achieve Family Portal. You decide as the family member in charge when that happens. But prior to reaching age of majority, family members will have the ability to create that account access for their learner in a view-only capacity so that they can also view their progress monitoring and see their goals and really get a good glimpse of what's going on and how they're doing to meet that progress. So it'll be really great for that. Once, though, the learner reaches that age of majority, we'll have all learners be automatically invited as well. So even if a learner maybe hasn't been invited prior to age 18, we'll be sure that all learners get that access at that point in time. So go ahead to our next slide. So this slide is a lot to look at, so I'll talk through it, but it kind of gives you a sense of who will be eligible to receive and create an account in the Achieve Family Portal. So the first topic or group here in blue is our IDEA parents, or those individuals who the federal law looks at as being eligible to receive that special education information. So you see here that we'll have our biological and adoptive parents, those relatives or other individuals acting as the IDEA parent, legal guardians of both minors and protected persons, court designees, powers of attorney, and surrogates. So each of those folks who are in a relationship type that meets one of those criteria would be able to potentially be invited to create an account in the Achieve Family Portal. As I mentioned, same thing with our special education learners. So prior to reaching age of majority, that IDEA parent can create an account and establish that for their learner if they wish. And then again, automatically inviting all learners once they reach that age of majority. Some questions that we've gotten along the way as we've developed this new tool is who would not be able to create an account? So we've established these different relationship types that would say, yes, you can be listed as someone who cares about this learner and is involved in their well-being and perhaps attending even an IEP meeting. But because you don't necessarily fall into one of those IDEA parent categories, would not be able to create your own account. So we're calling this parent other, which may be a step-parent relationship, for example, if you're not already considered the adoptive parent, that is. Foster parents, other relatives who are not acting in that IDEA parent role, or other friends who may live with the family or be a part of that relationship, and then parent and learner advocates. So those individuals would not be able to create accounts, but could certainly receive information if the IDEA parent chooses to share it with them. Okay, so what is the Family Portal intended to provide? So again, real-time access to be able to view those learner records like IFSP and IEP documents. Again, that real-time progress monitoring data, the ability to provide electronic consent on forms if you wish. Of course, individuals who decide they don't want to have electronic signatures but still want to physically sign documents will continue to have that option. It's also, again, intended to be this repository where all of your special education records are stored, can be accessed in real time on your watch rather than waiting for your IEP team to provide it. You can download, print, and save, email those documents as you need. So it'll be a really nice way to have that electronic access to information that previously you might have just gotten once a year during an IEP meeting. It will also provide a calendar on your dashboard that you'll see that will provide information about your upcoming meetings or deadlines for when like a reevaluation might be due. So it provides kind of those reminders for family members and learners as well. So what doesn't it do, or what is it not intended to do? It's not required. So family members and learners absolutely don't have to create an account if they don't want to, or if it's one more thing that they're like, nah, I'm good, I'm just going to stick to my paper copies. That is absolutely still a choice. And records are still required to be provided to you when you attend those IEP meetings. It's not intended to replace that person-to-person collaboration with your team. So certainly don't expect that this is the only way that you're going to receive information and updates. You're still required to have those IEP meetings and still communicate with your team. Finally, it's not intended to be a way for family members or learners to ask for changes directly on their documents. They can see how they exist today and can certainly print that out, write on it, and request changes in a meeting, but the system itself won't allow you to make changes. So what kinds of things might you do as a family member or as a learner in this new Achieve Family Portal? So I've put a random smattering of ideas of things that you might be able to do on the screen here, including reviewing those meeting notices, when you're scheduled to meet, who will be there, that kind of thing. If you have a health plan or an FBA or BIP, that data will be available for you to review as well. Reviewing those prior written notices after you have a meeting to say what happened, what is changing, and why. You'll have access to that there. Again, viewing those finalized IEPs or amendments, any of that reevaluation information. And then, of course, our post-secondary transition summary, right? Some of that information is not always as easily shared with families today. So this will provide a screen to be able to allow those family members who have a learner in that age group to be able to kind of see how is that progress going? What are we doing? What are the next steps? So lots of great things that family members will be able to see and review.
Hey Shannon, this is Beth
Yes.
Farms. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. I was just wondering
course.
quickly, on that last slide, there was a component that was showing preview the draft of that
Oh,
IEP.
yes. Yep.
Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, I sure can. Thanks for
Thanks.
asking. So in our current system, the team members, your IEP facilitator, has the ability to begin a draft of your learner's IEP. And prior to finalizing that, a draft version of that IEP can be shared to the Achieve Family Portal by the facilitator. And so that'll be a new functionality that will come out once the Family Portal launches. And so that draft, again, is intended to be a working document that you could then potentially review together with the team at an IEP meeting, knowing that it's still a work in progress, it's not the final form. Then what happens is after the meeting, after the IEP facilitator finalizes that IEP, that draft document will be replaced by the final version so that everybody is working from the most accurate and most recent copy of that final IEP. I see a question or a raised hand.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask a question about this slide as well before you went on, which
Of
was,
course.
we know that the Department of Ed has really spent a lot of time over the last couple of years really developing some fabulous resources in Achieve related to post-secondary transition summary. So I'm wondering, like, will the individuals who have access to the family portal also be able to see like all those potential resources? You know, one of the things that we know is that sometimes there can be a bit of a disconnect between secondary services
Mhm.
and adult services. And so
Sure.
I know there's a lot that's been built into that for planning the secondary transition. Can families also see some of those resources?
Currently, that's a really great question, and thank you for asking. Currently, we have just a very limited number of resources included in our resources section, but I'm always open to entertaining more. So I don't know if there's anything specific today in that functionality, but I absolutely love where you're going with that and definitely feel there's a need to really tailor that information for those post-secondary transition steps because there's a lot of unknowns, right? We can provide a lot of support and service while our learners are in the K-12 environment, but what happens next and how do we provide that support? And so I've just recently had the opportunity to have more conversations with Kelsey about how we can really build out some of those extra things. So I think it's probably coming soon. Good idea.
I had a question or a comment in the chat that says, will it include a contact page or team member contact information for students and parents?
Absolutely. Great question. So on that very first page, when you log in as a family member or a learner on that Achieve Family Portal dashboard, it's going to include the contact information of your IEP facilitator there. So you'll have that right on the home page, right on the front page when you log in. It will also include a link then specifically to that learner's what we're calling learner dashboard. And so that way, potentially, if you have more than one learner in your family who has access to special education services, you can select between the two and navigate directly to the learner that you're referring to right now. And then you could go back later and take a look at maybe your other child's IEP. So you'll definitely be able to see who those primary contacts are, as well as their email address and things like that. Great question.
Jenny has a comment
Yep.
as well. If the student isn't able to access the Achieve Family Portal until they are getting close to age of majority, unless their parent or guardian approves it, will that disincentive students from taking more of a leadership role in their
Sure.
education earlier? Please let me know if I'm misunderstanding.
Great question, Jenny. I think this goes back to the whole notion that having access to the Achieve Family Portal does not replace that person-to-person collaboration. So IEP teams are still going to be strongly encouraged to always bring that learner into the conversation at the earliest age appropriate for that learner, whether that be directly into the IEP meeting itself, or encouraging that family member to invite them to the portal prior to reaching age of majority. So I think certainly that's possible if a family member chooses not to provide access, but it will be something that would still be encouraged and discussed during those annual meetings, and will be something that will hopefully do the opposite, right? Hopefully family members will see the benefit of this and be able to then say, yes, I'd like to involve my learner earlier to be able to see what's going on and to have access. So I hear where you're coming from, and I'm hopeful that through education with our teams across the state, that educators will continue to advocate that their learners be invited. Great questions. Yep. So I see this next question about, is this information being shared with special education teachers? It sure is. We are actually providing the first related training to this next week to districts. And so one of the very first things that we'll actually have to do before we can launch the family portal is collaborate with all of our districts across the state to validate those relationship types that I mentioned earlier. So they'll be asked to take a look at what information currently exists in Achieve to say, who are those family members? Do they have their right or accurate relationship type assigned to them? Do they have a valid email address listed in Achieve? Because all of those things will be required in order to receive an invitation to participate in it. So a lot of times families, may or may not have included their email address right in Achieve. And so by getting this kind of validation check in, we can get hopefully more family emails added, and that will then promote the opportunity to be invited to the portal once it's ready. As far as when will it be ready, that's a great question. If I knew the answer for sure, I'd definitely tell you. Right now, we're still hoping to get that out this fall to be able to formally launch. So stay tuned. We're trying to get through all of the moving pieces and parts, including that validation, to be sure that we're ready to go. But it's still very much a very high priority from the DE to get that going as soon as possible. Good questions. So other things that we are working on behind the scenes to help support the rollout of the Achieve Family Portal are, again, these support resources that I'm outlining here. We are absolutely planning to support districts in the training of what the family portal looks like, and including building out what we're calling a toolkit of information to help support districts and their staff understand what is changing, how that impacts them, and how they interact both in Achieve and how they might support the Achieve Family Portal, including things like building out these frequently asked questions, a new webpage on the DE site so that we can really front load that with all kinds of links and materials, including how-to videos and how-to guides on how to use this new system, because we know that there's going to be questions for new users figuring it out for the first time. So we absolutely want to have those training materials and resources for families and for educators who might be looking at it for the first time to figure out, how does the system work? How do we get into it? What do we do? How can we do it? So all of those things are kind of part of our rollout plan as we move forward. So for those who are in education right now, I mentioned some of those changes that we're going to see and achieve. The first change there is that new annual requirement for that family contact validation. So we'll be asking those districts to take a look at it this year, and it'll feel like a big push up front because we have to go through everyone before we can invite them. But then moving forward, our plan is just that you'll reevaluate those relationship types each year when you renew that IEP. So it will take less of a one-time burden the next time we do this. Again, another change is going to be those new relationship types. So starting today in Achieve, we actually just rolled live some functionality that folks who are in education may see new relationship types, including parent, biological, and adoptive for the first time. So we're adding those new relationship types just to help really be clear on who should and should not be invited to the family portal. Again, that question about drafts, perfect question, because I forgot to mention it. And here it is again, with that ability for educators to share draft documents, whether that's the final IEP, it could be a draft of your functional behavior plan, your BIP, it could be lots of different things that you're able to push a draft of that document out to the portal for review with your family. Learners being added to the family contact table. So in order to support adding our age of majority learners into the Achieve Family Portal automatically, one of the big changes that we'll start to see is that 3 months prior to that 18th birthday, learners will also be automatically added as a family member in that family contact table. Previously, we haven't included them there, but we're doing this so that way we can be sure that we have a permanent email address on file for that learner. A lot of times right now, the only email we have for the learner is that K-12 school email. And we know eventually those learners are going to move on and not use that email anymore. So we'd like to be sure that we have a more permanent email address on file for them so that they can be invited to the portal once they reach 18 if they haven't previously been invited. So that way they have access long-term to those records.
Hey, Shannon, for the students who will not be in charge of their own guardianship as they get older, does that drive that component too, where we look on the IEP?
Great question. So are you thinking, will they still get access to the information? Is that your
Correct.
question?
Yeah,
Yes.
is that going to automatically send out to them even though they won't be their own guardian? Okay.
Correct. They will. Those learners will potentially be limited to view-only access and not have the ability to sign consents once we have an established legal guardian on file. But the way things are situated in Iowa today, everyone turns 18 and those rights transfer initially until that legal guardian is established. And so initially they may have interactive access potentially available to them. But once that legal guardian is established, we'll go through some processes to be sure that access changes back to view only for that learner who's no longer in charge of their educational decision making, and that the legal guardian of that protected person, that new category that we added, will have those signing and decision making rights. Yep, great question. I went really fast, but hopefully that was helpful. Are there other questions or thoughts that are coming to you as I kind of rattled through all of that?
Hi, Shannon. I just have one really quick question. I believe in one of the slides you discussed resources for families.
Mhm.
Where is that located on the Achieve system?
Great. Yep. So the resources are not currently listed in Achieve proper. They'll be listed specifically in the Achieve Family Portal as a new section. So that's, if you're looking for it in Achieve, you're right, you won't find it. but it will be a new section that's specifically geared towards families and their learners in the family portal. Good question. Awesome. Well, thank you, Kelsey, for the opportunity to start getting the word out and sharing more information. I'm happy to hang on in case other questions come up.
And thank you, Shannon. I know this has been definitely a huge lift, especially with all of the demands that I've had around age of majority and compliance, making sure learners have rights when they should and not when they
Absolutely.
don't. I think that's part of, you know, some of the nuances that make this really unique and exciting, but have also made it challenging because other states haven't done this yet. Iowa is the first one, right? So we're
It's true. Yep.
paving the pathway for the country in terms of virtual access, which is really cool. And the nuances around age of majority are complex and
It's true.
a big piece of that. So thank you so much for your work.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Okay, if you think of other questions, just jump right in. I'm gonna just keep us moving forward. And the next thing I have on the agenda for today is just talking about the realignment and some of the changes that we've had since, well, gosh, I think it all kind of kicked off in January with State of the State, and it's just been a snowball effect ever since then. I truthfully do not have a ton that I'm able to say about this at this point because I don't know. I know what's on this slide, right? And so what I do know at this point in time is that we have had some legislation related staffing changes, right? So we now have 2 division administrators over the division of special education at the Department of Ed, which is a new division, right? So Dr. Barb Guy, she's been our state special ed director for a long time, has assumed that one of those positions. And then there's also an acting division administrator, which is Dr. Angelisa Fineart. And Dr. Angelisa Fineart was the special ed director at Great Prairie AEA and will continue to support Great Prairie AEA as the regional special ed director under the DE. So those regional special ed director positions are now employed through the DE. And we have 6 of those hired and have 3 more in process. So 6 of the 9 AEA. So each AEA will have a special ed director that's employed through the DE because that is what the legislative decision was. And that's what they put in Iowa code for this particular point in time. Additionally, there will be regional continuous improvement positions underneath and supporting the work of the AEAs under each of those regional special ed directors. And the way those are posted and in the process of hiring right now. And the way that those were articulated in the legislation was really around population density. So the number of FTE in each AEA regional area will vary slightly based on the number of students served. So the bigger AEAs, more consultants, the smaller AEAs, fewer consultants. I don't know exactly what the algorithm or, what equation they use to determine that, but I know it's based on that foundation that was spelled out in Iowa code. The other major component of the realignment were changes to the Family Educator Partnership Program. This is that family advocacy support program that was previously contracted through the AEAs. And I'm really excited to have Pam Wilbur here. She is Ask Resources Center's new full-time transition coordinator, which is also a new position. But as Ask is the new contractor of this service, they are starting to expand their reach into each of the AEA regions with staff and family navigators to support families. And Pam actually comes from a really unique background of being a AEA professional learning lead in the area, specializing in the area of secondary transition, but also a part-time family educator partnership employee as well. So she really served both roles. So she has the expertise in secondary transition and the expertise in family advocacy to really make her a great asset to our system. So Pam, I don't know if you want to just unmute or introduce yourself, but I'm really excited to have her here and in this new position. And I'm sure you'll be seeing more of her. Mari's here as well. She's going into a full-time data position, but sorry, Pam, go ahead.
So yeah, Pam Welder. So I worked for Northwest AEA for 22 years, starting out as the family and educator coordinator. And then with my background, they utilized the skills that I had in transition. And then they taught me an awful lot, Northwest AEA, throughout the years. I think I did the transition coordinator position probably for about 15 of those 22 years. So I have kind of said before that I think I kind of got a job, like the dream job, that kind of combines the two of them into one. So I'm very excited to be at Ask.
Awesome. Mari, I don't know if you had anything to add. I saw you unmute there. Oh, we can't hear you. And it looks like you're unmuted. I wonder if your audio settings. Yeah. Are there other questions while Mari's figuring out her audio on that real quick? That's where we're at today. I'm sure there's more to come, but that's really truthfully what I know. And if you have questions, I'm happy to take them back. I can't guarantee I have an answer
Can you
today.
hear me now?
Yes, there she is.
Yay. Great. Just wanted to say, so happy to have Pam on board. She really brings in that educator perspective a little bit and that AEA perspective that is so helpful, you know, just using that same terminology that educators are using so that families are aware of those pieces. It's so great to be able to bridge that gap a little bit and more in that way. And also, I just wanted to clarify quickly, like, the changes with the FEP and Ask is not part of the legislation that took place.
Yes.
So that was a whole separate thing. It really had nothing to do with the legislation. So we can talk about that. In fact, next month, Ask will be presenting a little bit about our changes and what that looks like at Ask, and talking some more about Transition Iowa. But just to clarify that, yeah, the FEP positions that used to be at the AEA and that whole change did not come from the legislation. It was just a administrative decision from the Department of Education. So we will talk more about that next month. But so excited to have Pam and a new whole group of staff that will be out in the different regions of the state and working with us to support families. So thank you.
Mari, thank you so much for that clarification. I did not mean to misrepresent that. So I appreciate you jumping in to catch me there. Thank you. Any other questions on that note before we keep moving along? Awesome. Okay, differentiated accountability. It's kind of our next big bucket of work happening at the department right now. I don't know how familiar, I'm guessing we have people who have maybe never heard of it before, or maybe have just heard a little bit. And then I am sure we have others on the call today who are like knee deep or shoulder deep, even right in the thick of it, right? So bear with me, because I am going to try and give a little bit of background for those who might not be as involved, and then kind of bring us up to speed with where we're at today and where we can go from here. So for those of you who are not as familiar with differentiated accountability, this is the state's new results-based accountability model focused on educational outcomes for students with IEPs. So it's a special ed specific process. If you're familiar with like ESSA, it's very similar to ESSA, but specifically focused on just special education, okay? It's designed and intended to provide support to districts when and where they need it most. Now I'll explain what that looks like a little bit here in a moment. Like ESSA, it's a 3-year continuous improvement cycle. And we are now entering the 3rd year of our first official cycle. So new determinations of level of support for districts will come out in the fall of 2025. So just a year from today. And my gosh, it's gone by so fast. As of today, we have 99, this is actually really exciting, 99 total districts in the state focused on secondary transition. That's about 1/3 of all districts. And you can see the level of support, level 3, level 2, level 1, about how many districts are in each level. The levels are really indicative of the level of support that they're receiving to improve their outcomes. So districts that are categorized as level 3 are going to be the districts that are really needing the most support, whereas level 1s are the districts whose outcome data shows that they're doing well, or they're performing above the average, or the top third of the state, if you will, is what those level 1s are. And then the level 2s kind of fall in the middle. So why this is exciting and important to all of you is because secondary transition is one of the content focus areas in this model. So as districts are identified for a level of support, depending on their level of support, they either are assigned or get to choose a content area, secondary transition being one of those. And in the world of secondary transition, what we're really looking at is graduation rates, dropout rates, and post-secondary outcomes. So when I say post-secondary outcomes, what I mean is 1 year after leaving us in the school system, what are the students doing? What are our students, our graduates doing? Are they engaged in employment? Are they attending some kind of post-secondary education? Are they not engaged at all? And using those outcomes to really drive then what we can do in our schools to better support our students' outcomes, right? The post-secondary outcomes component is the leading component in our secondary transition data, meaning we put the most weight in that one to really influence and support how districts are supported, meaning it's just has higher influence on their data scores that assign them level of support and tiers. So as we're talking about improving these outcomes and we're talking about secondary transition planning, there's a number of components. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these because these are the components of the continuous improvement process that are really intended to drive those improved outcomes. So the goal is implementation of high quality, specially designed instruction, right? That's our special education services and supports. And how do we get there? Through coaching and professional development and monthly systems checks and fidelity implementation processes and teaming and collaboration. There's a number of different components that we're implementing to support progress within districts. As this pertains to secondary transition, though, we really want to whittle down to the individual student level focus, right? Meaning, when a student with an IEP enters the secondary transition planning process, there's a shift in the focus of the IEP. We begin to look at and intentionally plan for post-secondary expectations or outcomes in the areas of living, learning, and working. The post-secondary expectations are the core of this IEP planning process for students at this stage. Now, I preface this by saying this is where we're going. I know that this isn't happening everywhere all the time with fidelity, but this is the intention, this is the goal, this is where we're headed, right? When I talk about post-secondary expectations, what I'm talking about are those living, learning, and working components that are measurable, observable, and extend beyond high school, and they become more refined as the student progresses through high school. How do we influence those post-secondary outcomes? Well, that's really with the practices and predictors that we know work, right? We know that there's evidence to support all of these different practices, predictors, things that we can do with students while they're still within our walls, while they're still in school, to ultimately improve their outcomes and what happens in their life after they leave us here in high school. What I want you to know is I intentionally left these as live links on the screen here for you, because you can click on them and go in and learn more, read more about exactly what those practices and predictors mean, what they look like, how they can be implemented. Through this DA model, differentiated accountability model, we're really embedding these practices and predictors that we know work into the professional development that districts are participating in to support the inclusion of these concepts in students' IEPs. Oftentimes I get asked, well, particularly from parents, well, what is one recommendation or one suggestion? Like, what would you recommend? Like, how can we help? Like, what can we do? I said, look at this list, share this list with your team, share it with your IEP teacher, and just say, hey, like, these are the things that we know work. How can we incorporate these concepts into my student's plan? How can we build in an opportunity for community experiences? How can we build in and support the student to participate in a career tech ed course opportunity, right? You'll notice career technical education is one of those evidence-based predictors. That's one of our highest leverage opportunities for students to improve their post-secondary outcomes. We've also focused in on work-based learning and post-secondary preparation for post-secondary education. Excuse me. So the professional learning that I mentioned, like I said, we've really embedded implementation of these practices and predictors into that. But within that, we're really focusing on a couple of key concepts, right? Those high leverage things, right? The SDI framework for secondary transition being one of them. This is a framework the SDI framework isn't new, but applying it to secondary transition is new. And that slide that I shared with you earlier that talked about really letting the PSEs, the post-secondary expectations, drive the IEP for our secondary students in transition, is really what this framework hones in and supports IEP facilitators to do, right? It's a framework that is based, results-based outcomes and diagnosing, designing, and delivering for instruction for our students in the areas of their post-secondary expectations, right? That's the model that we're really training on and reinforcing we want teams to use in the schools. So every district that's participating in the secondary transition SDI courses are going to receive that professional learning around that framework. Additionally, the teams go through a data review process, looking at data that actually supports their implementation of many of these practices, right? So it's not necessarily, you could call it outcome data, you could also call it practice data, but looking at the quality of the service deliveries within their programming, within their systems, and where do they really need to ramp up, or what practice areas do they really want to focus on to support those outcomes, right? So they review their data and then they identify if they're going to focus on improving opportunities for career technical education, career connected learning, which I need to talk about here in a second. Work-based learning is another term for it, if you will. Post-secondary education preparation. So those three primary areas to support their outcomes. Career connected learning and work-based learning, I wanted to emphasize that simply because we've had some legislation changes and some language changes around what work-based learning is defined as, and having language around career connected learning being that kind of big umbrella term is something I think you're going to probably start hearing more of, whereas work-based learning is really just going to refer to those like sustained experiences with employers. There's more coming on that soon, and we can definitely discuss that more if that's something you're interested in hearing about and learning about, but it's very new. It just changed this summer in our legislation, so something we're in the process of developing and responding to. So those data elements I talked about, to be more specific, that districts are looking at in terms of improving programming for students. Here's really a full list of what those look like. I don't know if you have any questions about any of these, or so far I'll take a little pause here. I know I've been talking a lot. I hate talking at people, but I also know there's a lot of information and changes happening. So I want to make sure to share the information, but also hear from you guys as well.
Hey, Kelsey, do we happen to have the new course materials for that career connected learning?
I'm like this close to have it done. This close, yes. Thank you. If you're volunteering, I would totally take you up on proofreading it for me before I publish it out.
I would love to.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I'd love, we got some more time left, so we're doing great on time here, actually, you guys. This is wonderful. I wanted to share a little bit of a preview of the SDI framework with you, so you have an idea of what that really looks like. As you can see, the very first and most important step, I always emphasize this, is diagnosing to determine those post-secondary expectations. So are we really like identifying what the student's goals are, right? 1 year after school, Joey's going to be working part-time in a hands-on career where, you know, he gets to work with tools and machinery. Maybe he's a mechanic, maybe he's working in a factory. I don't know. Are we really defining what those observable, measurable post-secondary goals are, where the student will be when they're no longer in high school? And then step 2 is really doing that diagnose. We really just mean assessment, right? We're doing assessment, evaluation, learning about the student to understand how we can support them to reasonably achieve their goals, right? So we're diagnosing or assessing to determine what are the service, supports, and instruction the student needs to meet those post-secondary expectations, right? That could be specially designed instruction, or that could be linkages, that could be supports or activities. It could look a lot of different ways, and it's really an individualized student decision with the IEP team at the table, right? Designing for instructional delivery. This is really where you're putting that plan into place, making sure you're using those evidence-based practices and predictors that we looked at a couple minutes ago, aligning to the Iowa core and age appropriateness, right? These are students in high school, not students in first grade. We need to make sure we're aligning our goals and our services and activities accordingly. And we need to make sure we're maximizing opportunities for access and engagement. You know, what does that family school partnership look like? How are we incorporating high expectations and realistic and reasonable goals, and collaborating with the family to support the student? And then finally, the final step, or I shouldn't say final step, because this is really just a continuous cycle, right? It keeps going, it never ends. But delivering for learner engagement, I always emphasize with this one as well. The very first step when you're delivering and monitoring for progress is checking your fidelity of implementation, right? Are you implementing the plan as it was designed? Because if you're not, then that's really the first thing that needs to happen before you can realistically or authentically measure whether or not the student's making progress. So you need to make sure there's fidelity in your delivery, and then assess and determine progress made by the learner, and then make adjustments as necessary according to the fidelity and learner's progress. And I want to kind of pause here because I've been talking a lot, and there's a lot of pieces that go into this SDI framework. It's not just the teacher delivering all of these things. There's a lot of different ways that these services and supports and activities can look, right? And I'm just curious to kind of hear from some of you, whether you're somebody who is directly in the schools or the AEAs, or if you're a community provider, a voc rehab provider, or anywhere in between, a Medicaid provider. In what ways do you maybe see some of the work that you do connecting into this framework to support students? Or even some of those practices, like ways that you could partner with schools to support delivery of those proven practices.
Hey, Kelsey, this is Beth.
Hey, Beth.
So one of the things that we're looking at doing is just, how are we going to structure the coaching supports? And not only for our districts who are required to go through some of this training, but for also our core team members who support our other districts. How can we help instructionally coach some teachers through some of these different types of methodologies? Because sometimes, you go to the training, it sounds like a really good idea, but then implementing it and putting into practice with the particular students in the particular building you're in isn't always the easy part. So that's kind of what we're focusing on right now, is the coaching aspect of how can we support and make this easier and viable for the teachers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Beth.
Hi, this is Margie Woywood with Goodwill Industries in Dubuque. And we've partnered a couple ways with the school district. In the past, we were involved with the METS grant that the Dubuque Community School District had, and participated in training and transition changes there. And then we also offer our retail store for students to come and use for work experience and training. And the last way is we formed a partnership between the Dubuque Community School District, Northeast Iowa Community College, Goodwill, and Boca Rehab. And we've established a modified certificate delivery model for students who need to learn in a different way, who need more tutoring, more hands-on time to practice skills. And we've gone through 2 pilots with pretty good success of the CNA program. And the first group, I think, had 75% of the students who achieved their CNA certificate. This second group, I think, maybe wasn't quite 75%. And so now the planning team is moving on to look at other programs, because NICC is willing to use the same model for any certificate program. So if there's at least 6 students, they would do welding, carpentry, manufacturing, CNC operator, whatever's needed. So that's a big, I think that's a big benefit to students who are in transition in secondary education, that there's a way for them to achieve those skills in a non-traditional way that's adapted to what they need with tutoring and meeting their special needs that they might have.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's wonderful. So I hear a lot of like connections to the SEI framework and what you just described to me, because I hear like planning and preparing students for a career goal, and that might not just happen within the walls of the school, right? So there was a work-based learning opportunity that Goodwill provided, and ideally the team would have gone through the stages of diagnosing and designing to get to the point of identifying that as the next step for the student. And likewise, as they progress on to that post-secondary education environment, it sounds like what you've done is really developed a unique way of learning that maybe has different prerequisites than other college programs. And so for teachers to understand and use the SEI framework to help guide decisions on, well, who is appropriate for this program and who isn't, would make a lot of sense, because they can really get a more in-depth look at what the student's skills and present level of functioning is, and identify the best pathway then for that student. And it may be within the walls of the school, or it may not. So yeah, great examples. Thank you. I think, Lori, that's a partnership with Lori, right? Is there anything you would add, Lori?
No, Margie summarized it very, very well. Yeah, it all comes down to that, that linkage. Like you said, Kelsey, perfectly, that, the school, we're going to try to do everything, but it can't always be met always through the school. I did not like the VR local school plans when they first came out, because they're a lot of work. But I do enjoy them now, to a degree, that when we put these plans together, it really makes us think about all those transition components under the pre-ETS activities, and then who's responsible for what. In our district, we have some issues with overlapping or duplicating services, which I guess that's a good problem to have. But it's still difficult, because then you get the finger pointing. Well, that's not my job, that's your role, but by really laying those pieces out, and Margie referenced the METS program, so we kind of keep reinventing these things. But it's still that communication, that collaboration, and who's doing what, to get to our students to where they need to be. So I don't know, I rattle, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Thank you, Lori. I totally put you on the spot there too, so you can ramble all you want. So the practice courses, so we talked a little bit about the SDI course and what the SDI framework looks like. Really, this slide just intends to kind of describe what those practice courses look like. Although they are 3 distinct content areas, they do have, if you will, overarching themes that address these concepts really relevant to that content area, because depending on what content area you're looking at, it's really, the focus is a little bit different. The considerations are a little bit different. The systems, the programs that are available are a little bit different. And truly, the challenging part about developing these learning packages too is that those systems and those programs look different in every district and every AEA and across the state, right? So, the idea here is that we're establishing a framework that can really be tailored and individualized, not just to the district, but also on the individual student level. So with that, now I really want to hear from you guys even more than before because we want to talk about next steps in terms of how we can support IC with, I don't know if it's professional, like, I don't want to say professional learning, but additional series, additional presentations, projects. You know, what are your needs, your wants, your interests as it pertains to secondary, all things secondary transition? Nothing's off the table. As Mari and Pam mentioned, next month we are planning on having them do a session just to give updates and understand how Ask Resource Center A has changed in the last year, but B, what their role is and how they can really support students and families, not just in education, but there's other services they provide as well. And full disclosure, I literally pulled this right off of their website to put it in front of everyone here today to show and explain, hey, there's all these different buckets of work that Ask Resource Center can provide and support families with. And I mean, I didn't know that they had all of these things available, and maybe others wouldn't as well. So I wanted to share that as we elicit some feedback, A, particularly to Ask's presentation next month, but B, as we move forward, considering what could a transition series for ICs look like. You know, we really wanted to hear from all of you in terms of that. So I'm just gonna like open up the floor and see if there's anybody who wants to chime in. I mean, it could be voc rehab related, could be pre-ETS related, graduation requirements, supported decision making. I mean, there's transition is such a big umbrella, and I know you guys have heard from my predecessor Kirsten in the past. And so, you know, where she left off, I'm not sure. What comes next, not sure, but hoping you all can kind of help guide us.
Hey, Kelsey, this is Lori. You know, last year we went through the customized employment.
Yeah.
You know, and it was very beneficial, and, you know, try to figure out how to go a little bit deeper. The area I always kind of keep coming back to is something more with our community, something more with our businesses. We have partnered, Margie has done a great job with at Goodwill, you know, pulling business presenters in. And we've met at the Chamber of Commerce. We've talked to HR directors about customized employment, or just about this on-tap resource, our you know, our youth and our individuals with disabilities. But time and time again, we just get hit. You know, you hit that roadblock. I don't know if there's any new way, you know, of working with businesses, or new ways to pull businesses in and educate. Yeah, that's just a roadblock, a big roadblock for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like business engagement, business partnership, particularly from the lens of customized employment and students with complex support needs. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Hi, this is Beth. Lori invited us to come and speak at the Dubuque County Disabilities Expo, and I was able to hear a different voc rehab person explain to the small group some of their services, like kind of beyond our little pre-ETS, get them eligible frame. And that was really, really interesting. It was shorter than I would like, though. There were so many questions in my mind and so many exciting connections. And so I would love to hear a little more well-rounded or more broad scoped explanation or conversation about all the cool stuff that voc rehab does have to offer that maybe we don't see on a day-to-day basis, you know, in the schools and working for the AEAs.
Yeah. Can you give me a little bit more context? So one, do you know who that individual was? And two, what were some of the like little teasers that you got that you wanted more of?
Yeah. Lori, do you remember the name of that?
Yeah,
individual?
Avery Nugent was the main presenter.
I really liked she was talking about like financial literacy instruction that they provide, talking about some problem solving and support when they're looking at waivers and other types of benefits counseling, some of those types of things that I didn't even realize they offered those services. So it was really exciting, but I'd like to know more.
I think I
It-
just want to clarify too, and sorry, this is Samantha. I am also on the Disabilities Council and helped plan that expo for them to present. I just want to make sure to clarify that when we talk about those services that they're offering, always keep in mind with Voc Rehab and Iowa Works that they're doing those components connected to vocational services. So it's
Mhm.
not that they just offer that service. It's that if you're participating with them for vocational services, those are like additional things that they're doing. I know that some of you understand that, but sometimes it's easy to not think of that when we're talking about it. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out because I felt like there were some people in the community who maybe didn't fully understand that component, that it has to be connected to that voc service.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that would be a good, point of that conversation to make sure not only are those services, made aware to some of the families, especially when they have their kids in high school and aren't quite sure what Voc Rehab, may be able to support their students, but making that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes. Also, just because I can and you brought it up, they also talked about for agencies themselves. So if any one of you with your agencies, they also do free windmill service training where they can come in and talk to your employees and agencies about ways to be inclusive. So like teaching other companies how to have those maybe awkward or uncomfortable conversations or help people become more comfortable with how do we interact with Jim when he has a hearing disability? So helping agencies become more inclusive and aware of those conversations. So just throwing that out there since it got brought up in discussion. Giving Iowa Works a plug, I guess, but yeah.
Well, and you know what, that ties so nicely into what Lori was kind of asking for too. It sounds like really that business engagement piece and partnership piece.
Wanted to just add a comment to this recent discussion around some of the services available and then connected to the Voc services. Because there are so many different employees across the state in what's shared and then what's actually integrated into a plan, I think it would be really, really helpful to talk about sort of the potential of a full array. Beth, you shared benefits planning as an example. So that may not necessarily be put in, but maybe should be put in. So I love the idea of having more information that's broad with the caveat that it should be individualized and should be connected to the person's actual plan and need, but also is it available? Can families and those who support individuals know it's available, and then maybe be able to ask ask for that to be incorporated into other things that people we're in a really interesting transition time right now a bit with our monthly community of practice. We really want to be responsive to if people find it beneficial, what it is they really want topics to focus on. We know your time is incredibly valuable. And so Kelsey's question and the responses that folks have shared so far is so incredibly helpful to know here's what we would like to dive a little deeper in and would be meaningful to where we are today and what we want to be doing. So any other kinds of comments or suggestions folks could share, we would really appreciate it. And that way we can tailor it to what people really want and need.
Yeah, Amy, this is Beth. Not a question about content, but a little bit more about logistics. For those quarterly meetings, are those things that people would be able to join via Zoom? Because I know with funding, we're not going to be out and about as much as maybe I'd like to be down in Des Moines or Ankeny in that area. So
Yeah, we will have a virtual option. Thank you for asking, Beth. I did put it in the chat that our next IC Coalition meeting is next week, next Thursday. It'll be 10 to 3. There is a virtual option. It's going to be, I think, a fabulous meeting because there's so many things happening in the state right now. With Medicaid and the changes coming up around the waiver programs, with our mental health, behavioral services in regions, and having aging and disability, and our behavioral health leadership in the state come and talk about what those changes are. I know they just released, I think last week, the new regions for behavioral health regions in the state. So absolutely, people can join virtually. I know it's a really long meeting to have virtually. We used to have funding. We have no funding anymore for anything. But we used to have funding where we could help offset some travel expenses for folks. I know that there might be some options we can tap into if that's holding people back. We can try to help see if we can identify some of those resources, but we're really trying to get a sense if people really want things to continue, and if they find both the community of practice as well as the quarterly IC meetings of value, and wanting to really make sure that we're getting topics that make it worthwhile. So Misty just put something in the chat directly to me about the community of practice link. I will send it out again. That link is the same for this monthly community of practice every month. You don't have to register. And I will send it to you, Misty, and also share it out when I send the recording for this and the reminder. And then Bill said, take a deeper dive into benefits planning. Benefits planning is crucial for people that are worried about losing benefits. Many people are not aware it exists. Thank you, Bill, because that is huge. And I think Misty would concur as a leader in our state around benefits planning. So yeah, that definitely we can do. So please continue to share ideas if you have them. I'm gonna just see if any other folks have anything they want to add, or any other questions and comments for Kelsey.
I just want to make a quick correction. Not that it's a huge deal, but it helps with understanding process. I'm the local coordinator for Dubuque for the East Central region. The mental health regions will be going away. So when you said the new regions, I just want to clarify it won't be regions. They will be called behavioral health districts. So it'll be a little bit different, and it'll be combining mental health, substance use, tobacco, and problem gambling all into one funder system. So just for clarification, so people don't get confused. It won't be regions, it will be districts. Yeah.
Thanks, Samantha. You know that.
Yeah.
It's a moving target, isn't it?
I'm living in that world so much right
I
now,
know.
honestly, but it does make a difference, because I think there is going to be a lot of confusion too, especially now that the map is out. We know how different these regions are going to be structured into the districts funding wise, but now we also know map wise what that really is going to look like. So just helping people get the language down helps, I think. Yeah.
Very much so. I can share the map with folks.
If anyone's interested too, HHS just posted today, they're going to have some listening sessions or another listening session to get input from the community about the behavioral service system. It looks like that's going to be Wednesday, August 14th from 4 to 5 o'clock. And I can forward that email I got to somebody. Who do I send that to?
You can send that to me, and I will send it out to the community of practice.
Okay, perfect.
Anything else, folks, want to share or have questions about or would recommend?
Amy, what about like self-employment? I know Voc Rehab offers some of those supports. But we've heard across the state so many different great stories about self-run businesses and how individuals have started things up. So maybe to hear some more success stories and how individuals got where they started and how they got there.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Lori. Self-employment is a really nice option that I think we don't always consider because we think it's maybe too complicated or out of reach. And there's so many forms of it. And it can really be an option that aligns well with a person's talents and interests and contributions and can truly potentially lead to more self-sufficiency financially for people than what might be available otherwise. So as a self-employed person, I just want to say it can be a great fit and there's a lot of resources out there to help with it, but we often feel like it's, oh, that's too big, or someone has to have these sort of skills. Well, someone has to have that kind of support, because I couldn't do it without my accountant. He could do it without me. Thank you. Anything else, Kels? Do you have anything else you want to share?
Just my contact information. Please feel free to reach out at any time. Email, phone. This is my work phone. It's also a cell phone, so you can call, text, email, whatever is most comfortable for you. I'm happy to answer questions, give feedback, brainstorm, collaborate. Nothing is off limits. I'm an open door, so don't hesitate to reach out.
And it just put the Zoom link in the chat for the COP, but I'll also send that out to folks. Right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks everybody so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Kelsey and Shannon, for all the great information. Thanks to Ask Resource Center, Mari and Pam for agreeing to do next month's session. We'll get some information out on that, and we'll start to work on getting some opportunities for presenters on the topics that you shared as well. So thanks everybody. Have a great day.